Hey everybody, how's it going? Before we get into today's video, I want to ask to see if you're subscribed real quick. If you're not, it's free and it will let you know whenever we post new videos. Without further ado, Freddie Barnes' heavy boots echoed through Station 47's cargo hold as he methodically checked each container's manifest against his datapad. His weathered face remained impassive as he found yet another discrepancy, massive fingers tapping the correction into his report with practiced precision. The dock workers avoided his gaze as they shuffled past, their shoulder scales flattening in submission when his harsh eyes swept over them.
Chief Barnes,
A nasally voice called from behind.
surely these detailed inspections aren't necessary. The manifests were all approved by
Officer Norian, yes. Barnes didn't turn around, continuing his examination of the container's security seal. And now they're being approved by me. The dockmaster, a wiry Salaxian with too many rings on his fingers, wrung his hands.
But we've never had issues before. The previous security chief
Was fired. Barnes finally turned, using his full 6'7" frame to loom over the dockmaster. For incompetence. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Would you prefer that I follow his example? The dockmaster's throat pouch fluttered.
No, Chief Barnes.
Then let me do my job. Barnes returned to his inspection, running a scanner over the container's seams. The device chirped, detecting a faint energy signature where there shouldn't be one. He allowed himself a small frown. Open it.
But
Now. The dockmaster's rings clicked against each other as he input the override code. The container's seal broke with a hiss of escaping air. Barnes stepped forward, ignoring the dockmaster's stammered protests as he swept his flashlight's beam across stacks of perfectly legal industrial components. Everything matched the manifest. Almost everything. Barnes reached up and pressed the hidden catch his scanner had detected. A false panel in the ceiling dropped open, revealing racks of unregistered pulse rifles, military grade, enough to arm a small mercenary company. Interesting cargo, Barnes rumbled, turning back to the dockmaster. But the Salaxian was already running, rings flashing as he disappeared around a corner. Barnes keyed his comm. Security teams to Cargo Bay 7, full lockdown, and someone find Officer Norian. We need to have a chat about his inspection protocols. As his team swarmed the cargo bay, Barnes continued methodically documenting everything. He'd been a cop too long, and a Marine before that. To get sloppy just because he'd found what he was looking for. Every detail would be recorded, every procedure followed to the letter. When Overseer Tichan tried to bury this, and he would, Barnes wanted the documentation to be ironclad. His datapad chimed with an incoming message from Noryun. Meet me in my office. We need to discuss the situation. Barnes' jaw tightened. He'd been on Station 47 less than a month, but he'd already identified Noryun as part of the problem. The man had been an idealist once, according to his service record. Now he was just another cog in the machine, looking the other way while smugglers and criminals used the station as their personal transit hub. But Barnes hadn't spent 20 years in law enforcement by being stupid. He finished his inspection first, transmitted copies of his findings to multiple secure locations, and then headed for Noryun's office. The corridors seemed emptier than usual. A few station residents he passed hurrying away with averted eyes. They knew something was coming. This was a test. How far would the new chief of security go? How much would he see? And what would he do about it? Barnes allowed himself a grim smile. He'd showed them exactly what happened when they underestimated human determination. Station 47 needed cleaning up, and he'd start with this weapons shipment, no matter who it belonged to or who was protecting it. He never saw the trank dart coming. One moment, he was stepping into Noryun's office. The next, his reflexes were failing him as darkness crept in from the edges of his vision. The last thing he saw was Noryun's disappointed face looking down at him.
you should have just kept quiet, Barnes. Some things aren't worth dying for.
Barnes tried to respond, to tell Noryun exactly what he thought of corrupt cops, but unconsciousness claimed him before he could form the words. The first thing Barnes noticed was the vibration, the distinctive hum of a transport vessel's engines at full burn. His head throbbed as consciousness returned, mouth dry from the sedatives. They'd secured him well. Military-grade restraints bound his wrists and ankles to a metal chair bolted to the deck. Through blurry vision, he made out Officer Noryun's silhouette against the vessel's viewport. The gas giant that Station 47 orbited filled most of the view, its swirling storms casting a sickly orange glow across the cramped cabin.
He's awake,
one of the other officers announced. Barnes recognized him as Noryun's regular muscle. The man's facial ridges were pulled back in what passed for a sneer among his species. Noryun turned, his shoulders slumped with the weight of resignation rather than guilt.
This didn't have to happen, Barnes. You had a good position, decent pay. All you had to do was understand how things work out here.
Barnes worked moisture back into his mouth before responding.
How things work?
He repeated, voice still gravelly from the drugs.
You mean letting criminals use the station as their personal warehouse? I mean maintaining order,
Noryun snapped.
Do you think it matters if some weapons slip through, some drugs, some contraband? The alternative is chaos. The cartels would tear each other apart fighting over the shipping lanes. Innocent people would die.
They're dying anyway, Barnes stated flatly. You're just choosing which ones. Noryun's subordinates shifted uncomfortably, but their commander only sighed.
And that's why we're here. You could never see the bigger picture.
The viewport's orange glow darkened as they descended toward a lunar surface Barnes couldn't yet see. One of the other officers, a brutish creature with mottled skin, stepped forward eagerly.
Welcome to Exilis,
he sneered, displaying rows of needle-like teeth.
Hope you packed for humid weather. And teeth. Lots of teeth.
His partner joined in, clearly enjoying himself.
Better hope the beast isn't hungry. Though I hear it's always hungry for fear.
He inhaled deeply through his nasal slits.
And you are going to be very afraid, human.
Barnes met their taunts with stony silence. These weren't soldiers or even proper law enforcement, just thugs with badges trying to scare him before they killed him. He'd faced worse in the Marines. The transport shuddered as it entered the moon's atmosphere. Through the viewport, Barnes caught the first glimpse of Exilis, an endless expanse of violet-tinged jungle beneath a perpetually stormy sky. The trees were impossibly tall, their canopy forming a living ceiling that the transport had to descend through.
They say the beast can smell fear from kilometers away,
the first officer continued, clearly disappointed by Barnes' lack of reaction.
Hunts anything that shows weakness, anything that runs.
And then I won't run, Barnes stated simply. That one got under their skin. The mottled one grabbed Barnes's chair, leaning in close enough that spittle flew as he spoke.
You think you're tough, human? You think your military training means anything here? This isn't your precious Earth with its predictable predators. This Exilis, this beast will... Enough.
Noryun's quiet command cut through the tirade.
We're here.
The transport settled into a small clearing, its landing struts sinking slightly into the soggy ground. Barnes could smell the jungle even through the ship's filtration, a cloying mixture of decay and sweetness that made his enhanced senses tingle with warning. They released his restraints roughly, shoving him toward the exit ramp. Barnes stayed silent, memorizing their faces. If he survived, they'd regret not killing him cleanly.
Any last words, tough guy?
The mottled officer asked, clearly still trying to get a reaction. Barnes turned to Noryun instead.
You were right. Some things aren't worth dying for.
He paused.
But they are worth killing for.
The former Marine's matter-of-fact tone finally cracked Noryun's resignation. The corrupt officer looked away as his subordinates literally kicked Barnes down the ramp. The transport's engines were spooling up before Barnes even regained his feet. He watched it lift off without expression, disappearing into the violent sky above. Only then did he take stock of his situation. 20 years of military and law enforcement experience told Barnes exactly how screwed he was. No shelter, no tools, no weapons, not even clean water. Just his station uniform and boots. The air was thick enough to chew, heavy with spores and who knew what else. The trees around him were wrong. Too smooth, too angular, like something had designed them. Evolution gone wrong, maybe? Somewhere in the distance, something roared. The sound wasn't like any Earth predator. It had harmonics that made his bones vibrate. The beast, he assumed, his would-be executioner. Barnes allowed himself a small, grim smile. They'd wanted him to be afraid. Instead, he felt focused. The clearing's edge offered his first close look at the local flora. The trees weren't just smooth, they were actively secreting something that made his skin tingle when he got too close. The ground cover wasn't much better. Everything was either thorned or glistened with suspicious moisture. His boots left shallow impressions in the soil that quickly filled with purple-tinged liquid. Assessment, he muttered to himself, falling back on training. Immediate threats, dehydration, hostile environment, predators. Assets. He looked down at his uniform. Boots, clothes, training. A crack of thunder made him look up. The storm above was getting worse, but the thick canopy caught most of the rain. What did make it through sizzled when it hit certain plants. Acid rain. Because, of course it was. He needed shelter. The clearing was too exposed, but the jungle, every survival instinct screamed that entering that maze of toxic vegetation meant death. He had no way to test what was safe to touch, no way to identify what might be edible, no way to... A sound stopped his analysis cold. Something massive moving through the jungle, not bothering with stealth. Must be big enough to not need to. Barnes stayed perfectly still, as he could only presume to be the beast emerged into the clearing. The stories hadn't done it justice. 6 legs moved with predatory grace, supporting a body that looked like evolution's greatest hits of killing machinery. Multiple eyes regarded him with alien intelligence. And those teeth. Well, he'd seen smaller guns. The beast's head turned slightly, nostrils flaring as it scented the air. Barnes kept his breathing steady, heart rate controlled. If this thing hunted by fear, then being afraid meant death. Simple as that. Sort of like wolves. He watched it taste the air again, confusion evident in its posture. This close, he could see the natural camouflage of its scales. They reflected light like dull mirrors, which resulted in it matching the colors of whatever was around it passively. Perfect camouflage, no matter their environment. The spines along its back and tail flexed independently, and he noted their positioning. They definitely weren't for show. Its tail was like a whip. One flick and the spines on it would crack at supersonic speeds. Deadlier than any bullet. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The beast seemed almost puzzled, as if it wasn't quite sure what to make of him. And then it simply dismissed him, turned aside and began moving along the clearing's edge, apparently more interested in whatever it had been hunting before. Barnes's tactical mind raced. The beast wasn't attacking because it couldn't sense his fear, but more importantly, it was hunting, which meant that it knew what was safe to eat, what paths were safe to travel. The decision came with calm clarity. He was dead anyways if he stayed in the clearing. Following the beast might kill him faster, but at least he'd learn something before he died. Ugh, time to earn that combat tracking certification, he muttered, carefully beginning to parallel the beast's path. He kept his distance, using the creature's massive form as a reference point, while studying how it moved through the hostile vegetation, which plants it avoided, where it placed its feet. The beast gave no sign that it noticed or cared about his presence. It simply continued its hunt, and Barnes continued his observation. He'd probably die soon enough, but until then, he'd gather every scrap of information he could. Knowledge was survival, and if he survived long enough, knowledge would become his weapon of vengeance. Rain continued to fall through the canopy as darkness crept in, sizzling where it hit the wrong plants. But somewhere ahead, the beast knew where it was going. For now, that would have to be enough. The first lesson was simple. Everything here tried to kill you. The trees secreted contact toxins, the flowers released spores that could strip lungs raw if you took a deep breath. Even the soil hosted microorganisms that would eat through unprotected flesh. Thank God for his steel-toed boots. Barnes learned by watching the beast navigate it all. The massive predator moved with deliberate precision, following paths that Barnes gradually recognized as safe routes through the chemical warfare around them. The beast's tail would occasionally flick out, launching spines through particularly dense patches of vegetation like a cat clawing to mark territory. The resulting holes would release clouds of toxins that dissipated in specific patterns Barnes carefully memorized. He'd been following the beast for 3 days now, maintaining his distance but studying every detail. His throat burned with thirst, but he'd seen what the local water did to smaller creatures that tried to drink from the wrong pools. The beast only drank from specific sources, clear spots where underground springs bubbled up through mineral formations that somehow neutralized the worst of the toxins. Barnes's hat could filter out the rest. When the beast first paused at one such spring, Barnes waited. The predator drank deeply, then moved on to pursue whatever it was hunting. Only then did Barnes approach the spring, examining the mineral structures around it. The rocks had a distinct crystalline pattern that he began to recognize as other water sources. One small victory in the battle to survive. He took a loose chunk of one just in case it would work on small amounts. Hunger was another matter. The beast's hunting style was devastatingly efficient. A combination of ambush and pursuit that left little of its prey intact enough to scavenge. Its saliva contained something caustic, dissolving meat almost as fast as teeth could tear it. Barnes had watched it take down something like a scaled elephant on the first day, but by the time the beast moved on, there was nothing edible left. He'd tried foraging, but even with the beast's example of what to avoid, identifying safe food sources was nearly impossible. The local equivalent of fruit looked identical, whether it was edible or insanely lethal. He'd resorted to watching which plants the smaller wildlife ate, but even that was unreliable. What was safe for them might still kill him. The beast seemed content to ignore his presence entirely, treating him as neither threat nor prey. They would occasionally glance his way with those multiple eyes, but there was no real recognition there. Just the same dismissal he'd seen on that first day. He was simply another feature of the landscape, no more worthy of attention than a particularly tall tree. That changed on the fourth day. The beast had cornered something in a grove of toxic trees, a creature about Barnabas's size, but with too many limbs and what looked like natural armor plating. The prey animal was clearly terrified, its fear response making it more appealing to the beast's hunting style. But in its panic, it did something unexpected. It bolted straight towards Barnes. He had seconds to make a decision. Standing his ground meant likely death. The creature's armored hide would tear him apart as it ran him down. Dodging the wrong way would put him into contact with the toxic trees. The beast's hunting patterns had shown him the safe paths through this grove, but reaching them meant... Barnes moved, not away from the charging creature, but toward it at an angle. His boot found the specific spot where he'd watched the beast step earlier, launching him into a roll that took him under the panicked animal's wild charge. He came up into a crouch in the next safe spot, already moving toward another as the creature crashed headlong into the toxic trees behind him. The beast's prey thrashed in mindless agony as the tree secretions did their work. The massive predator arrived moments later, dispatching it with ruthless efficiency. But instead of beginning to feed, the beast turned those multiple eyes toward Barnes, really looked at him, for the first time since their first encounter. Barnes met its gaze calmly, noting the way its head tilted slightly, evaluating, analyzing. This was no simple animal. There was real intelligence in those eyes. It had seen him use its own hunting path and recognized the deliberate nature of his movements. The beast's jaw opened slightly, displaying rows of those bladed teeth. Then it simply turned back to its kill and began to feed. But something had changed. Barnes was interesting now. Barnes watched a group of what he had termed fire ants swarm over the beast's latest kill. The tiny insects literally lit on fire and burned through the flesh with extraordinary speed, breaking down the toxic residue from the predator's saliva and turning it into bits of black dust they could eat. He'd seen this pattern dozens of times now. The beast would make a kill, feed on the choice parts, and leave the rest for the local scavengers. But something about this particular kill was different. The prey, a massive herbivore that resembled a cross between a buffalo and a praying mantis, had died too quickly to trigger the beast's usual feeding response. Instead of consuming its prey immediately, the predator had seemed almost disappointed. Barnes leaned forward slightly from his observation point, careful to maintain his footing on the safe path that he mentally mapped. The beast's hunting patterns had initially seemed random, but he'd begun to notice a progression. It didn't just hunt what was closest or easiest to catch. It specifically pursued prey that showed signs of fear. "You don't use their fear to track," he muttered, watching the fire ants continue their work. "You need that fear to eat." Barnes recalled his academy training about animal behavior and biochemistry. Fear could literally ruin the flavor of meat if you butchered an animal wrong. Chinese cuisine sometimes sought it out. Fear triggered specific physiological responses, increased heart rate, adrenaline production, chemical hormones That's it, he breathed. "It's not about the fear. It's about what the fear does to the meat." The beast's head swiveled at the sound of his voice. Over the past week, it had begun acknowledging his presence more frequently, especially when he spoke. Barnes kept his movements slow and deliberate as he studied the remains of the kill. The fire ants weren't just burning it like some faux cooking adaptation. They were specifically burning the parts of the animal the beast's saliva touched. That's when the realization struck him like a lightning bolt. The ants were neutralizing the toxin so that they could eat. The beast was watching him intently now, all 4 eyes focused on his position. Barnes met its gaze steadily as the pieces fell into place. The creature's hunting style wasn't about terrorizing prey just to get it to make a mistake. It was about optimizing its food source. Fear reactions changed body chemistry, and they made the meat more nutritious somehow. The local insects and fungi that broke down its kills were after the same thing. And that explains why there's far fewer of those ants on this particular carcass. That fear wasn't strong enough. Which explained why the beast had ignored him on that first day, and every day since. His military training, his years of high-stress situations had taught him to control his fear response, to maintain calm even in life-threatening situations. To the beast, he simply didn't register his food. As if reading his thoughts, the beast flicked its tail, launching a supersonic spine that impacted a tree trunk near Barnes' position. A cloud of toxic spores erupted, but Barnes didn't flinch. He was already moving to the next safe spot, having long since memorized the beast's warning tactics. It wasn't just doing this randomly, it was seeing if it could catch him off guard and make him tasty. The predator's jaw opened slightly in what Barnes could have sworn was a grin. But Barnes ignored the possibly hallucinated gesture and turned back to the carcass. Here goes nothing. If it kills me anyways, then at least I know my corpse ain't on the menu, he muttered to himself. The beast watched him with what seemed like genuine curiosity as Barnes used a sharp piece of mineral from near the spring to cut away a portion of the meat. With that same mineral chunk, he'd gathered some charcoal he'd made by tossing pieces of neutralized wood into the fires the ants made. With it, he could start a fire, despite the humid environment. He had either just solved his food problem or was about to die horribly. The first bite was purely analytical. Texture, taste, immediate physical reaction. When no burning sensation or numbness followed, he took another. The meat was tough, but surprisingly palatable. More importantly, it wasn't trying to kill him. The beast made a sound he'd never heard before, a low rumble that seemed almost approving. But then again, Barnes knows from torture training that isolation is one of the most powerful hallucinogens in existence. It simply turned and began moving towards its next hunting ground. Barnes thought it perhaps expected him to follow. Barnes allowed himself a small smile as he followed the creature deeper into the toxic jungle. The beast may have intended to ignore him to death, but instead it had given him exactly what he needed, a way to survive long enough to make Station 47 regret their mistake. All he had to do was not die in the meantime. The sounds of engines cut through the jungle's ambient chaos. Barnes was already moving before the first echoes faded, picking his way through the toxic vegetation with practiced ease. After nearly 2 months on Exilis, he knew the safe paths as well as the beast did. The transport settled into the same clearing they'd dumped him in. Different crew this time. He could tell by their careless movements as they shoved another poor bastard out to the loading ramp. The exilees' terrified wails drew Barnes' attention, but he was too far away to reach the clearing before the transport lifted off. He watched from the cover as new arrival panicked, charging blindly into the jungle. The wrong part of the jungle. The stranger's agonized screams cut off quickly as the toxic flora did its work. Barnes closed his eyes for a moment, jaw tight. Another death on the Station 47 ledger. Another reason for vengeance. But he couldn't reach the clearing safely without the beast's presence to ward off more aggressive predators. And the massive hunter was currently stalking something in the opposite direction. He learned that lesson the hard way early on. The beast wasn't the only apex predator in this jungle, just the most intelligent. The others would happily tear apart anything that strayed into their territory, fear response or not. Barnes had nearly died twice trying to explore on his own before accepting that he needed the beast's presence to move freely. So, he turned away from the clearing and resumed following his unlikely guardian. The beast was on the trail of something big, moving with a fluid grace that still amazed him despite weeks of observation. Its hunting patterns had become familiar. It occasionally fires its supersonic spines to make a loud and very distinct crack. If it catches a whiff of something panicking in response to the noise, it follows and fires more spines to spook it off safe paths and drive it into a corner. Once cornered, it's as easy as landing a single bite. Between its teeth and toxic saliva, the kills are almost painlessly quick. Almost. He'd also noticed it taking more frequent shots at him with these spines, always carefully aimed to miss, but close enough to test his reaction. The beast seemed almost frustrated by his continued calm, as if it couldn't quite understand why he wouldn't show fear like proper prey. A massive shape suddenly burst from the undergrowth ahead. something like a rhinoceros but with too many horns and natural armor plating. The beast reacted instantly, tail whipping forward to launch spines into the creature's flanks, not to kill, but to injure, cause pain, and make the meat taste better. Barnes kept his distance as the beast ran its prey through the familiar pattern of psychological warfare. He'd seen this dance 12 times now, but something was different. The armored creature wasn't responding normally to the fear tactics. Instead of panicking, it was getting angry. The beast seemed thrown by this development. Its usual hunting strategy relied on creating panic, on driving prey into making mistakes. An enraged opponent charging straight at it wasn't part of the plan. Barnes watched the battle unfold from his safe position. The beast was larger, but the armored creature's natural plating deflected those terrible teeth. They crashed through the toxic vegetation, neither showing any signs of yielding. The beast's tail whipped again and again, but the spines barely penetrated its opponent's armor. Finally, the two titans broke apart, both breathing heavily. The beast's prey had suffered from numerous wounds, but none fatal. The beast itself showed signs of damage where those horns had found purchase, and for the first time since Barnes had begun observing it, the predator seemed uncertain. The armored creature pawed the ground, preparing for another charge. The beast's tail twitched, but it was running low on spines. This fight wasn't going according to its usual tactics, and Barnes could see it calculating odds, deciding whether this prey was worth the damage that it would take to bring down. In the end, the beast did something Barnes had never seen before. It backed down, turned aside, and simply walked away, leaving its prey standing confused in the clearing. The armored creature snorted once, and then lumbered off in the opposite direction. Barnes followed the beast, noting how its posture had changed, and moved more cautiously now, testing each step as if its confidence had been shaken. But more importantly, it showed a capacity to learn, to recognize when its usual tactics wouldn't work and adjust accordingly. That was the difference between mere predators and true hunters, Barnes mused. The ability to learn from failure, to adapt. The beast had proven itself far more dangerous than he'd initially assumed, not because of its teeth or claws or hunting prowess, but because it could learn, could change its tactics based on experience, just like him.
The scent was wrong. Not prey still showed no fear, no matter how close the spines landed. It made no sense. Everything feared, everything ran, everything made the meat taste right when the teeth came. But not prey simply walked the safe paths, watching, learning, following. I tried to ignore not prey, tried to make it leave like the other strange creatures that sometimes appeared in the dropping place. They always ran into the wrong plants, always died screaming, always made the meat taste wrong. But not prey was different. Not prey waited, watched, survived. The ground shook. My feet shifted automatically to maintain balance, multiple eyes scanning for prey that might be startled into running. The shaking grew stronger. Trees cracked. I recognized the signs, the ground breaking that sometimes changed the safe paths. A massive trunk groaned above. I started to move, but the ground breaking had already split the soil beneath my feet. My claws scrabbled for purchase as the ancient tree began to fall. Impact, pain, darkness. Consciousness returned with a taste of blood. Not good blood. Mine. I tried to move, but the weight across my back was too great. My spine-launching muscles were pinned, legs trapped into the broken ground. Even my jaw was pressed awkwardly by a branch, preventing me using my toxic bite to dissolve the wood. Not prey approached cautiously, studying the situation. I watched through pain-blurred vision as Not Prey examined the fallen tree, tested its weight, moved to different angles. Always careful to stay on the safe paths, even now. I knew I would die here. The other predators would come soon, drawn by the smell of trapped prey. Without my spines, without my bite, without the ability to move, I was defenseless. Perhaps Not Prey would be the first to feast. It had learned the safe paths well enough to survive alone now. But Not Prey did not attack. Instead, it began gathering things. Long branches from safe trees, specific rocks near the spring places. I watched with dim curiosity as Not Prey arranged them with purpose, creating something new. Understanding came as Not Prey worked the branches under the fallen tree. The strange collection was a tool, making branches into extensions of Not Prey's own limbs. I felt pressure shift as Not Prey used rocks as anchors, lifting the massive trunk just enough. I pulled myself free with the last of my strength. Everything hurt. Multiple ribs were broken. One leg wouldn't move right. But I was alive. Not Prey stepped back, maintaining safe distance. Wise. I am wounded, and wounded predators are dangerous. But as my head cleared, I found myself studying Not Prey with a new understanding. Not Prey wasn't just strange. Not Prey was smart. Smarter than me. Smart enough to create new things. To change what was into what was needed. Smart enough to save a predator that had been trying to make Not Prey into prey for months. My primary hunting grounds were lost. The groundbreaking had changed too many of the safe paths. I would need to find new territory, establish new routes, learn what plants had shifted and what dangers had emerged. But first, I needed to heal. Needed safe places to rest, I looked at Not Prey again. Not Prey knew the safe paths. Not Prey could find food without showing fear. Not Prey could make tools, could solve problems the beast could not. Perhaps Not Prey could be more than Not Prey. Could be useful. Could be. Pack. The concept was strange. I had always hunted alone. Abandoned my pack when they tried to take my kills. But survival came first, and survival would be easier with Not Prey's strange abilities, with its tool-making and problem-solving. I limped forward, careful to show my teeth were not ready to bite. Not Prey watched calmly as I lowered my head. Not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Hunting was different with Not Prey. The small, clever one knew things I did not, saw things I could not, make the hunt better. Not Prey understood how Prey thought. Would point to signs I had missed, broken plants, dropped food, watermarks that showed where Prey would return. Would motion to places where Prey might run before Prey knew it would run there. Made herding easier, made catching easier. The first true hunt together was strange. Prey was large, many-legged, fast, would be difficult to chase into killing ground alone. But Not Prey moved ahead while I circled, drove Prey toward better ground without showing my teeth. Prey ran from Not Prey's presence straight into my bite. Clean kill. Good meat. Not Prey took only small parts after I fed. Always burning with clever fire-making like those tiny bugs. Strange way to eat, but Not Prey had strange ways about many things. Was always watching, always learning. Learned how I launched spines to mark territory borders. Started gathering fallen spines, studying them. Even learned to use them to mark own paths when separated. 2 seasons passed. Territory grew larger with 2 hunters working together. Other predators learned to stay away when they smelled both our scents. Even the water beasts that sometimes crawled up from the swamps knew better than to challenge our hunting grounds. Not Prey's clever ways made surviving the next groundbreaking easier. Showed me how to tell when the ground would split before it split. How to watch for trees that would fall before they fell. How to find new safe paths faster when old ones changed. In return, I taught Not Prey the secret hunting paths through the deeper jungle. The safe places to drink, the signs of bad air and poisoned ground. Not Prey learned quickly, moved almost like proper hunter now. Still no fear scent, but no longer needed fear to be useful. The noisy flying thing that brought new prey returned twice. Each time dropped strange creatures that died quickly in wrong places. Not Prey watched, but did not help them. I understood. Bad hunters deserved bad deaths. But Not Prey's scent changed when watching Flying Thing leave. Became sharp, like hunting. Rage, but controlled. Not Prey wanted to hunt Flying Thing. Wanted to kill things inside it. This I understood. Territory stealers deserved death. Had seen, not prey, watching broken shells of old territory stealers in the deeper jungle. Strange metal things, now covered in plants. Not prey studied them with the same focus used for studying my spines. Was planning something. Good. Plans made hunting better, and this would be a very big hunt. When the flying thing came again, we would be ready. Would show territory stealers why even other predators feared our hunting grounds. Not prey's clever planning and my strength would make them regret entering our territory. The hunting rage rose just thinking about it. But Not prey's way was better. Wait, watch, plan, then kill. We would wait. We would watch, and then we would kill.
Officer Noryun watched his subordinates rough up their latest exile with professional detachment. The Salaxian accountant had stumbled on the files he shouldn't have seen, asked questions he shouldn't have asked. Now he'd face the same fate as all the others who threatened Station 47's carefully maintained order.
No, please, please!
The accountant stammered, facial membranes fluttering in terror.
I won't tell anyone what I saw. I'll delete everything, please!
Noryun didn't bother responding. He'd heard it all before. Had probably even meant it himself once, back when he still believed in absolutes like right and wrong. Now he just felt tired. Another necessary evil in an endless series of sins. The transport settled into the familiar clearing on Exilus. Everything looked exactly as it had 2 years ago when they left Barnes here. The same toxic vegetation, the same oppressive atmosphere, the same deadly silence that always preceded. The thought died as something massive hit the transport's hull with enough force to rock the entire vessel. Multiple eyes peered through the viewport. Far too close, far too intelligent. Noryun's throat went dry as he recognized what he was seeing.
It's here!
One of the officers screamed, drawing his weapon.
The beast is...
The rest was lost in the chaos as the transport's loading ramp suddenly burst inward. The beast's armored head filled the opening, terrible teeth gleaming in the cabin's emergency lights. But it didn't enter. Instead, it simply held position, blocking their escape. A figure stepped around the beast's bulk. Ragged uniform, weathered face, eyes like frozen steel. Barnes. Somehow alive, somehow here, somehow controlling the deadliest predator on Exilus. Noryun's officers opened fire, but Barnes was already moving. 2 years in this environment had changed him. Turned efficient military precision into something more primal. He crossed the cabin in 3 steps, disarming the first officer with a grip that shattered bone. The second officer's shot went wide as the beast's tail whipped through the opening, a single spine taking him through the throat. The third dropped his weapon and ran, straight into the beast's waiting jaws. In seconds it was over. Just Noryun, Barnes, and the terrified accountant remained conscious in the blood-splattered cabin. The beast watched through the ruined doorway, muscles coiled and ready.
Barnes,
Noryun managed, his own hands empty and raised.
We thought...
You thought wrong. You thought wrong. Barnes's voice was rough from disuse, but the cold fury in it came through clearly.
You thought I'd die alone out there.
Thought your pet monster would eliminate another problem. His lip curled slightly.
And now, it's my pet.
As if to emphasize the point, the beast's jaw opened in what could only be described as a grin. Noryun had never seen it display that kind of obvious intelligence before. He had never imagined it could be anything more than a mindless killing machine.
What are you going to do?
Noryun asked quietly. He already knew the answer, but something in him needed to hear it. I'm gonna take this ship, Barnes said flatly. I'm gonna return to Station 47, and I'm gonna show Overseer Tichan exactly what happens when you throw someone into hell and expect them to die. He paused, glancing at the accountant. You can stop cowering. We're not gonna kill you. The Salaxian's membranes fluttered in confusion. You're not? No. You're going to live to tell everyone exactly what happened here. How the beast and I dealt with corrupt officers who thought they made the law. They don't. I do. Now, I am the judge, the jury, and... Noryun closed his eyes as Barnes approached. He'd always known his choices would catch up with him eventually. had known that compromise after compromise would eventually lead here. His last thought before Barnes' fist connected was almost relieved. At least he wouldn't have to make any more necessary evils. Executioner.
I'm telling you, it's true!
Klopp slammed his drink down for emphasis, sloshing some of the neon liquid onto the lucky asteroid's scratched bar top.
My cousin's friend was there when it happened.
Your cousin's friend? Adhid snorted, mandibles clicking in derision. Like your cousin's friend who saw the ghost ship in the Mercurial sector? Or the one who swears the Void Pirates have a base inside a sun?
No. This is different.
Klomp's eye stalks waved excitedly.
This really happened. The whole station's talking about it.
Sarax leaned back in his chair, watching his two friends with practiced amusement. Same argument, different rumor. Klomp would believe anything he heard, and Adhid wouldn't believe something if he'd watched it happen right in front of him.
So, what's the story this time?
Sarax asked, mostly to head off another debate about the Void Pirates.
What's got Station 47 in such a buzz?
Station 47?
Adhid's protective scales bristled.
That cesspit? Whatever happened there, it's probably just another gang war. Place has been corrupt since it was built.
That's just it.
Klomp could barely contain himself.
It's not just another gang war. The Overseer's gone missing. Him and half his security force.
Probably ran off with their smuggling profits.
Adhid muttered into his drink.
No, you don't understand.
Klomp's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper.
They say it was the beast, the monster from Exilus. Someone tamed it and brought it to the station.
That got Adhid's attention.
The beast? That fairy tale that used to scare kids? Oh, come on. You can't believe. It's not a fairy tale.
Sarax cut in quietly. Both his friends turned to look at him.
The beast is real enough. Killed plenty of people who got exiled to that moon. But nobody's ever tamed it. Nobody's even survived seeing it.
Exactly.
Klomp jabbed a manipulator in Sarax's direction.
Until now. They say it was some human security chief they tried to get rid of. Instead of dying, he made friends with the beast. Trained it. And 2 years later, they came back and just tore through the station security like they were nothing.
Human? Adhid scoffed.
Tamed the beast. Oh, now I know you're full of... There's footage.
Sarax interrupted again.
Security cameras caught some of it. This human and something big moving through the corridors. Never got a clear shot of the creature, but the bodies it left behind.
He shuddered.
Those were real enough.
See?
Klomp practically bounced in his seat.
Stories are true. They say the beast could smell fear, could track it across a whole moon. And this human somehow figured out how to...
Stories!
Adhid cut him off.
That's all they are. The Overseer probably just bit off more than he could chew with some rival gang. Made up this whole thing about monsters to cover his tracks while he ran. Happens all the time in places like...
The bar's main door slammed open, with enough force to rattle glasses on nearby tables. A massive figure filled the doorway, silhouetted against the station's exterior lights. The stranger's weathered uniform bore the faded insignia of Station 47 security. But the way he moved spoke of something far more dangerous than a simple security officer. But it was the shape behind him that brought absolute silence crashing down over the bar. Something huge. Something with too many eyes and too many teeth. Something that shouldn't exist in civilized space. The beast's tail flicked once as it squeezed through the doorway, spines glinting in the bar's dim lighting. Its jaw opened in what might have been a grin as it regarded the terrified patrons with predatory intelligence. The human, it could only be Barnes, stepped up to the bar. His voice was rough as granite as he addressed the bartender.
2 drinks, whatever's strongest.
Adhid's mandibles worked soundlessly as the beast settled into a coiled position near its human partner. Klomp's eye stalks had gone completely rigid. Even Sarax found himself utterly unable to move. Barnes glanced their way, something like amusement crossing his hard features.
You want to be careful with rumors,
he said conversationally.
Sometimes they turn out to be true.
The beast's answering rumble might have almost been laughter.